into? Into his own moat, you say, said Sir Rodney. He paused to think about the fact. Lady Pony noticed that he didn't seem overly shocked by Holt's action. If anything, there was a look of grim satisfaction on the battlemaster's face. The Baron frowned at Rodney's tacit approval. I know the men deserved it, he said, but we can't have people going around throwing knights into the moat. It's not diplomatic. Lady Pauline raised one elegant eyebrow. Indeed not, sir, she said, and Holt had been altogether too high-handed about it. He continued. I'm going to have to speak to him about it most severely. Someone certainly should, Pauline agreed. Rodney grunted a reluctant assent. He definitely needs taking in hand. You wanted to see me, my lord, said a familiar voice. And they all turned guiltily towards the door, which Rodney had left open when he barged in. Holt stood there, clad in his grey and green belted cloak, his face half hidden in the shadows of the deep cowl. It was uncanny, the Baron thought, how the man could appear almost without a sound. Now Arrow, like the two Craftmasters, was conscious that he had been caught talking about Holt behind his back. He flushed in embarrassment, while Sir Rodney cleared his throat noisily. Only Lady Pauline appeared unconcerned, and she had a lifetime of practice at appearing unconcerned. Ah, yes, Holt. Of course. Come in, you won't you? Shut the door behind you. There's a good fellow. As he said these last words, Baron Owl shot a baleful glance at Sir Rodney, who shrugged guiltily. Holt nodded greeting to Lady Pauline and Sir Rodney, then moved to stand before the Baron's massive desk. There was a long and increasingly awkward silence as the Ranger stood waiting. Arrow cleared his throat several times, not sure where to begin. Inevitably, it was Lady Pauline who broke the impasse. I imagine you're wondering why the Baron asked to see you, Holt, she said, relieving the tension in the room and forcing Holt to say anything at the same time. The Ranger Tacton, as ever, glanced at Pauline, then the Baron, and replied in as few words as possible, Yes, my lord. But it was a start, and now Baron Howard had been given a chance to gather his thoughts and overcome his embarrassment. He brandished the letter in Holt's general direction. This he managed in time not to say brohouse again. The word was being grossly overused, he thought. This business with Sir Digby Holt. It's just no good at all. I agree, my lord, Holt said, and the Baron sat back in his chair, a little surprised and quite a bit relieved. You do, he said. Yes, my lord, the man in a nincompoop and a fool. Even worse, he took me for a fool as well. I suppose I can understand that he might want to keep some of his men for the planning season, but to try to hide them in the forest from a ranger, why, that was a downright insult. The men needed to be taught a lesson. But was it your place to teach them, Holt? The Baron asked. Now Holt raised one eyebrow in reply. I don't recall seeing anyone else prepared to do so, my lord. Perhaps Holt acted in haste, in the heart of the moment, Lady Pawnee interjected, trying to give Holt a graceful way out of the situation. But the Ranger simply looked at her, then back to the Baron and said, No, it was pretty well thought through, and I didn't rush at all. I took my time. Lady Pauline shrugged. The Baron's expression showed his exasperation. He would be willing to give Holt some leeway in this matter if the Ranger would only allow it, but Holt was obviously determined to be pig-headed. Then there are no mitigating circumstances, Holt? he said firmly. You have acted excessively. I have no choice but to reprimand you. Holt considered the matter before replying. An awkward situation, my lord, since I am not technically answerable to you. I answer to Ranger Command and ultimately to the king. The Baron opened his mouth to answer, then closed it again. Holt was right, as the Ranger attached to Red Montfief, he was required to cooperate with the Baron, but he was independent of the Baron's authority. That fact and Holt's intentionally unhelpful manner were beginning to get under the Baron's skin. Once again, it was Lady Pauline who suggested a compromise. Shrugged a compromise. Perhaps you could inform Holt in an official manner that you are displeased with his actions, she said. The Baron considered the suggestion. It had merit, he thought, but the wording could be a little stronger. Displeased is too mild of a word, Pauline. I would rather use the word vexed. I would be most discomforted to know you were vexed, my lord, Holt said, with just the slightest trace of mockery in his tone. The Baron turned a piercing glare on him. Don't take this too far, it warned him. Then we shall make it extremely vexed, Lady Pauline, he said meaningfully. I leave it to you to put it in the right form. He looked from her to Holt. You will receive the official notification of my displeasure tomorrow, Holt. I tremble in anticipation, my lord, said Holt, and the Baron's eyebrows drew together angrily. I think that will be all, Holt, he said, very obviously restraining his temper. Lady Pauline shook her head slightly at Holt's sardonic tone. He was walking a very fine line, she thought. The Ranger now bowed slightly to Baron Harold, turned and left, closing the door quickly behind him. The Baron let his breath out in an angry sigh. The man is impossible, he said. In all the time I've known him, I have never seen him like this. He is touchy, bad-tempered, sarcastic. What on earth is the matter with him? Sir Rodney shook his head. Like the Baron, he had known Holt for many years, and counted him as a friend. Something is obviously bothering him, he said. But what? Perhaps he's lonely, Lady Pauline said thoughtfully, and both men looked at her in amazement. Lonely? Holt, said Sir Rodney incredulously. Holt's never been lonely in his life. He lives alone. He likes it that way. He did, said Lady Pauline, but things have been different for the past year or so, haven't they? You mean Will? The Baron asked. Think about it. Holt has only ever had 2 apprentices. There was Gillen 5 or 6 years ago, and now Will, and he's a rather special young man. The Baron nodded, not sure she was right, but willing to listen. He's that all right. Lady Pauline was warming to her theme now. He's amusing and interesting and talkative and cheerful. I should imagine he's brightened Holt's life quite considerably. Not only that, Rodney put in, but he saved Holt's life as well. Exactly, said Lady Pauline. There's a very special bond that's developed between those two. Holt has become as much a surrogate father as a mentor to Will, and now he's sent him away. I think he's missing him. He'd never admit it, but I think he's been enjoying having a young person around. She paused to see what the Baron thought. He was nodding in agreement. You could be right, Lady Pauline, he said. You could be right. He considered the matter for some seconds, then said thoughtfully, You know, it might be a good idea if you were to have a talk with him. My lord, said Lady Pauline, why would I have more influence over him than anyone else? Well, said the Baron, I just thought that since you and he were once something in Lady Pauline's expression stopped him from going further. You know, he finished weakly. I'm afraid I don't, my lord, she said. What is it that I should know? Well, it's just that people have always said that you and Holt were once. He realized he was floundering, and he stopped once more. Lady Pauline was smiling expectantly at him, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. They were like ice The Baron looked around for help and noticed Sir Rodney. He appeared to him for confirmation. Rodney, you've heard what people say, haven't you? But the Battle Master was an experienced campaigner, and he knew when a tactful retreat was the wisest course. I'm afraid I have no idea what you're talking about, my lord, he said. I never listen to idle gossip, he added, a little smugly. Harold shot him a baleful look. Just you wait, said Ronnie, saw it, read the message there, and shrugged. He'd take the Baron's anger over Lady Pauline's any day of the week. A wise policy, Sir Rodney, Lady Pauline told him. Then turning back to the Baron, she continued, but perhaps I do have a suggestion that might ease the problem of Holt. The Baron seized the lifeline eagerly. That's splendid, my lady, splendid. And in point of fact, that's all I meant when I said that you might talk to him. After all, you are a very wise woman, very wise. Lady Pauline had a smile with some difficulty. For a moment she played with the idea of testing him further, pretending to equate wisdom with advancing years, but she felt he had suffered enough. You're too kind, my lord, altogether too kind. The Baron breathed a sigh of relief that the conversation had veered away from a dangerous ground. He had handled it very adroitly, he thought. Women were always susceptible to flattery, after all. So what is the excellent idea of yours, he said, piling it on a little more. Lady Pauline hesitated just long enough to let him know she could see right through him, then continued, Well, sir, since Holt is missing his apprentice, I thought we might look at replacing young Will for a week or two. Replacing him, Harold said, puzzled. We can hardly give Holt a new apprentice for 2 weeks, my lord, my lady. No, my lord, she agreed, but I thought I might lend him one of mine. It was Rodney who was first to see where she was heading. Young Alice, he said. The tall blonde one. Lady Pauline inclined her head in his direction and smiled. So Rodney found himself wondering about the rumoured relationship between Pauline and Holt. She was tall, elegant, and graceful, and even now that her blonde hair was streaked with grey, she was still an exceptional beauty. Exactly, she said. I mentioned I'm planning to send Alice on her first independent mission. I thought we might ask Holt to escort her. I'm sure his experience would be good for her confidence. Baron Arrow was tugging thoughtfully at his short beard. She's a rather solemn lass, isn't she? He asked, and Lady Pauline shook her head. On the contrary, my lord, she has a delightfully dry sense of wit and a beautiful smile. We've been encouraging her to make greater use of it, and you think a week or so in her company might snap Holt out of this bleak mood he's in. Well, if he's looking after her, it'll take his mind off his own troubles. Lady Pauline replied, In addition, Alice is young and free-spirited, and quite beautiful. I think her company might be enough to cheer up any man. Even grim old Holt, she added, smiling. The Baron smiled too. She sounds just like her teacher, and this time it was no idle flattery. Okay, well, thank you for reading up to Chapter 8. If you'd like to listen to me read Chapter 9, then please stay tuned. Thank you. Bye-bye.